Today we're diving into something truly unsettling unfolding in Germany, a story from France that has politicians in an absolute uproar, shocking numbers from Sweden that expose a massive contradiction, and a secret plan from Washington that could change everything. But here's the thing. What I'm saving for the end might be the most revealing piece of all. I spent years inside one of those big establishment media companies, the kind everyone recognizes. I watched editors reshape stories, saw producers kill segments that didn't fit the approved narrative, and I realized something fundamental. The institution cared more about controlling the message than delivering the truth. So I walked away. Now I work independently. I answer to no one but you, and I tell you what's actually happening, not what someone wants you to believe. And listen, what we do here isn't easy. Every single fact you hear gets checked. Every claim gets verified, because the last thing I want is to spread misinformation in a world already drowning in it. That takes time, it takes effort, and it's only possible because of viewers like you. So if you find value in what we're building here, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and if you're able, consider becoming a sponsor. It means everything. And trust me, stick around until the end, because that's where the most interesting revelation is waiting. Let me start with something that sounds almost surreal, and yet it's happening right now in Germany. In the beautiful city of Fulda, located in the state of Hessen, authorities are dealing with what can only be described as a bizarre and deeply concerning incident. A man walked into two separate grocery stores and deliberately sprayed fruits with an unknown liquid. Just think about that for a moment. Someone methodically contaminating food that families would take home, that children would eat. The stores reacted immediately, pulling every affected piece of fruit from the shelves and halting sales entirely. Within hours, police patrols managed to apprehend a suspect, but here's what makes this even more unsettling. No one knows why. The motive remains completely unclear. And now investigators are checking whether other supermarkets might have been targeted as well. The district health department describes this mysterious substance as oily, with a faint vinegar smell. It's currently being analyzed in laboratories, and authorities have issued a stark warning. Anyone who purchased fruits or vegetables from these stores should not, under any circumstances, consume them until testing is complete, because the potential health threat cannot be ruled out. Now, does that sound like a society operating normally to you, or does it feel like something has fundamentally shifted? Keep that question in mind, because what's coming next from Germany is even more jaw-dropping. But first, let me ask you this. When did contaminating food in public stores become something we even have to worry about? What does that tell us about where we are as a civilization? After lengthy negotiations, Germany's Christian Democratic Union and the Social Democratic Party finally reached an agreement on a new voluntary military service program. On the surface, that might sound reasonable enough. Voluntary service, civic duty, national defense, all the usual talking points. But here's where it gets absolutely explosive. The Left Party isn't just opposing this agreement, they're taking practical action that has the entire political establishment losing their minds. Co-chairs Jan van Aken and Ines Schwertner have submitted a proposal to the party's executive committee, and a decision is expected this weekend. In their letter, they're calling for something unprecedented. They want their party to provide practical support, and I'm stressing that word, practical support, to anyone who wants to refuse military service. We're not talking about abstract political statements here. According to Van Aken and Schwertner, the party plans to develop consultation and information services on how to avoid military service based on conscientious objection, operating through an association called Left Helps. But wait, it gets even more remarkable. Jan van Aken, the Left Party leader himself, announced that his party intends to publish an actual guide on how best to avoid military service. They're literally planning to release a manual, including advice on how to appear, let's say, not entirely mentally fit. Van Aken told a news portal that there are many good tips, in his opinion, that he'd like to share with young people who simply don't want to be forced into wearing a military uniform. Those were his exact words. Now think about the implications here for just a second. A major political party in Germany, openly strategizing about how citizens can evade military obligations. And they're not hiding it, they're announcing it proudly. What does that say about the state of consensus in European societies? What does it reveal about how citizens actually feel about the direction their governments are pushing them? But here's what most people are missing, and this connects to something bigger I'll get to shortly. If you're starting to see the pattern here, If you're noticing how these stories connect, then you're exactly the kind of viewer this channel is built for. And if you haven't already, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button right now, because this analysis is only getting deeper. Meanwhile in Berlin, the sound of gunfire echoed through the streets once again. This time, it was the Spandau district. For those unfamiliar with Berlin's geography, let me paint the picture. Berlin police are currently engaged in a full-scale battle against rising violent acts involving firearms throughout the city. On Wednesday night, unknown assailants opened fire on a driving school. A driving school. Let that sink in for a moment. According to police representatives, several dozen shots were fired. Miraculously, thankfully, no one was hurt. But here's the disturbing part. This marks the third targeted action against Berlin driving schools in just the past few weeks. 3 separate incidents. Now, police are quick to reassure everyone that, fortunately, to use their word, no one was harmed. They're searching for the perpetrators, naturally, and they're not hiding the fact that in recent weeks, shootouts have repeatedly occurred on Berlin's streets. Yesterday, authorities released their first weekly report from a special operation. According to this report, since November 13th, approximately 1,000 people have been checked, along with more than 700 vehicles. Officers initiated around 70 criminal cases and about 130 administrative violation cases. They're emphasizing that the fight is in full swing, and they even boasted, if you can call it that, about discovering dangerous prohibited items and weapons during these checks. Knives, firearms, batons, pepper spray canisters, body armor, weighted gloves, prohibited stun guns, and of course, banned substances. The stated primary goal? Preventing armed confrontations, combating organized criminal formations that continue their unacceptable activities in Berlin. And in late October, as they further explain, 3 people were injured in 3 separate shooting incidents over just 8 days. Police classify all these incidents as clashes and power struggles between rival organizations. You heard that correctly. According to police representatives, conflicts are increasingly being resolved through armed confrontations on the streets. Now, I want you to pause and consider this carefully. Berlin, the capital of Germany, one of Europe's most important cities, is experiencing what authorities themselves are describing as gang warfare. Armed power struggles playing out in public spaces, driving schools being shot up, and the official response is basically, don't worry, we're working on it. Does that inspire confidence? Or does it sound like a situation spiraling beyond control? We're going to trust that law enforcement will ultimately handle the task they've been assigned. But ask yourself this, how did we arrive at a point where this is the new normal? And is anyone in leadership actually addressing the root causes, or are we just watching reactive policing try to contain symptoms of something much larger? Hold that thought, because the pattern continues. In Magdeburg, the Christmas market opened this week, exactly 1 year after a horrific incident when a vehicle drove into the crowd, resulting in the tragic loss of 6 lives. More than 140 vendors opened their stalls, and at least €250,000 was invested in new security measures, including concrete blocks positioned strategically throughout the venue. Here's the context you need to understand. Christmas markets are a huge part of German culture, an annual holiday tradition carefully preserved since medieval times that has successfully spread around the world. So after discussions about whether security at the market was sufficient earlier this month, and after state officials initially refused to grant permission for opening, city authorities and organizers made additional improvements to maximize security measures. They're hoping that people will once again embrace the Christmas market, that families can visit calmly without the slightest fear, and we certainly hope that everything will be fine, even wonderful. But notice what's happening here. A beloved cultural tradition that represents joy, community, and celebration now requires concrete barriers and 6-figure security investments just to take place. That's the world we're living in now. Traditions that were once simple expressions of shared culture have been transformed into heavily fortified events because the alternative is considered too dangerous. Is this progress? Is this making society better? Or are we just normalizing the abnormal, accepting conditions that previous generations would have found completely unacceptable? I'm not sure anyone in power is even asking these questions anymore, which brings me to something happening in France that's causing absolute political chaos. The new chief of staff of the French armed forces just made a fiery appeal to city mayors, urging them to prepare their constituents for possible war, and the reaction has been swift and fierce. Let me give you the details, because this is extraordinary. extraordinary. It should be noted immediately on social media, French citizens have already posted that General Fabien Mandon, who called on local officials to prepare citizens for potentially having to participate in terrible events to defend who they are, also urged them to be ready to accept the loss of loved ones, including young people. Read that again slowly. A top military official is telling mayors to psychologically prepare their communities to lose their children in war. And here's where it gets even more interesting. This French chief of staff, according to observers, rose through the ranks remarkably quickly. Perhaps too quickly, French political parties from both ends of the spectrum, which together represent a significant portion of voters, have now spoken out against this and emphasized something crucial. There is no consensus in France regarding the necessity of preparing for war. Jean-Luc Mélenchon, the far-left leader who has run for president 3 times, expressed complete disagreement with Mandon and said that Mandon should not presume losses that could be the consequence of their diplomatic failures. Think about what Mélenchon is saying there. Unlike the military, politicians are absolutely not willing to go to war, much less prepare for casualties. And he's pointing the finger directly at diplomatic failures. In other words, if we're talking about war, maybe we should be talking about why diplomacy collapsed first. But that's not a conversation military leadership wants to have, is it? What you're watching here is a fundamental disconnect between military institutions pushing for war readiness and political representatives, even those on opposite ends of the spectrum saying absolutely not. The citizens didn't sign up for this, and that's happening in France, a nuclear-armed nation, a permanent member of the UN Security Council, a country that has historically projected significant military power. If there's no consensus there about preparing for war, what does that tell you about the broader European mood? Now let me connect this to something else that came out today, and this is where the hypocrisy becomes absolutely staggering. Sweden's Foreign Minister Maria Malmer Stenergard just revealed some numbers that should shock every European citizen paying attention. Since the beginning of the large-scale conflict, the European Union has paid Russia 311 billion euros for imported goods and energy resources. Meanwhile, the EU has provided Ukraine with 187 billion euros in aid. Let me do that math for you. That's 124 billion euros more paid to Russia than given to Ukraine. 124 billion. And according to Sweden's foreign minister, this is nothing less than a disgrace, referring to European Union leadership, which knows all of this perfectly well, watches everything from the sidelines and deliberately does not disclose such data. Do you see what's happening here? European leaders stand in front of cameras, pound their fists on podiums, and lecture everyone about standing with Ukraine, about defending democracy, about opposing aggression, and simultaneously they're writing checks to Russia that dwarf the aid they're sending to the very country they claim to support. That's not just hypocrisy, that's something more profound. It's the complete hollowing out of stated principles. And before you think this is just about Europe, let me tell you what's happening in Washington, because this might be the most significant development of all. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt announced yesterday that the Trump administration has been conducting non-public work preparing a new peace plan for Ukraine. According to Leavitt, Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and Secretary of State Marco Rubio have been quietly working on this plan over the past month. They've been communicating with both sides, Leavitt explained, to understand what the countries are willing to do to achieve lasting and stable peace. That's how the White House press secretary emphasized it. Leavitt also clarified that negotiations are ongoing, but she will not reveal details of the plan prepared by the United States. However, the war in Ukraine will be resolved despite the presence of doubters. Those were Caroline Leavitt's exact words. So here's where we are. We're observing what happens next. But everyone has clearly understood one thing. Donald Trump, despite resistance, will absolutely not stop his plan under any circumstances. And whether you support him or oppose him, whether you think this peace plan is genuine or strategic maneuvering, one thing is undeniable. The trajectory is shifting. The assumptions that governed the past 3 years are being challenged, and the people who built their positions on those assumptions are panicking. Now let me bring this all together, because if you've been paying attention, you'll notice these aren't isolated stories. They're symptoms of the same underlying condition. In Germany, you have food contamination that seems almost random, political parties openly helping citizens avoid military service, and armed confrontations on city streets that police describe as gang warfare. In France, you have a top general telling mayors to prepare for war, while politicians across the spectrum reject that framing entirely. In Europe broadly, you have leaders paying Russia far more than they're helping Ukraine, while simultaneously demanding everyone else sacrifice more. And in Washington, you have an incoming administration working on a peace plan that the entire establishment opposes but cannot prevent. What does all of this tell you? It tells you that the systems we've relied on, the institutions we've trusted, the narratives we've been fed, they're all breaking down simultaneously. And the people in charge either don't know how to fix it or they're too invested in the current trajectory to change course. That's what makes this moment so dangerous and so important. Because when systems break down, the question becomes what replaces them. And that's not a question anyone seems prepared to answer. So here's what I'm asking you to do. Don't just consume this information passively. Think about what it means. Talk about it with people you trust. Challenge the official narratives. Demand better from the people who are supposed to represent you. And keep coming back here, because I promise you, I'll keep digging, I'll keep connecting the dots, and I'll keep telling you what's really happening, not what they want you to believe. If you found this valuable, if you're seeing things more clearly now than you were 20 minutes ago, then hit that like button, subscribe to this channel, and seriously consider sponsoring what we're doing here. This work matters. Your support makes it possible. And I don't take that lightly. I believe I'll be first to tell you many of the most important developments as they unfold. And these are the information points for today and for now, which speak volumes. Write your opinion. Tell me what you think about everything that's happening, and I wish you peaceful skies. Let's hope the news is only good from here on out. Take care.